The thin, dark man steps to the table. He clips the lavalier microphone to the lapel of his red velvet jacket and sits down. On the table in front of him is a large velvet mat. On the mat is a deck of cards. The man looks up, smiles. The smile is genuine but slightly cold under a thin, well-kept mustache. As he smiles at the crowd of people seated in front of him, his hands are busy opening the card case, taking out the deck and putting it through series of spreads, flourishes, and turnovers. The hands seem to work of themselves, with a will of their own. As the cards are made to dance across the table, gleams of light flash from the star sapphire on the right hand, only to be outdone by the diamond sported on the left. Before this man says a word, you know three things about him. He is a card cheat, he is good at it, and you wouldn't want to play cards with him. This is the man, M-A-N, Martin A. Nash, the Charming Cheat. My name is Benny Slade, and welcome to another episode of the MO Sessions.
Darlings, cardicians, and magicians, welcome to Discovering the MO Sessions. This is Evelyn Moore talking, here to welcome you to a Dead Slight Society production, hosted by that charming Benny Slade. I hope you enjoy this session. I know I always do.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the MO Sessions. I am your host, Benny Slade, and I wanted to start off my episode here in March. It's been a while since I recorded an episode, but I thought it would be suiting for me to talk about Martin Nash and kind of dive into that. I've had a few people tell me they don't know who Martin Nash is, which I find unreal, and that's okay. We're all learning, and we all learn differently. And Martin Nash was in a generation that doesn't exist anymore. There are a few out there, but not very many anymore. And going through, our COVID times, I think using this podcast as a platform to educate is really important. So there is a younger generation that I'm, realizing that follows my podcast and is listening. And I want to help them expand their sleight of hand with cards in any way that I can. And I figured maybe spotlighting a few magicians along the way would be helpful, just so we know where we are, who we're talking about. And we're kind of closing that gap between the older generations and the younger generations, which already has its own issues. We're not going to get into that. But Martin Nash, he was born in 1933, March 18th. So today is March 16th. It is Tuesday. He was born March 18th, 1933, Martin Allen Nash in Vancouver, Canada. And the information and the research that I have done for him, and to be completely honest, I would read that introduction to the episode was from Ever So Slightly, which is his first book Stephen Minch wrote in what's called the Nash Trilogy. And I'm fortunate and honored to have this in my collection, in my library to reference and read. And just from the beginning, the amount of time he puts into talking about how the serious card student should go about on his way through this book is amazing. And it's a different generation of, I don't want to say like tough love, because that kind of, it's off-putting, but it's more so giving you the information. And if you're unable to do it, then collect stamps. I don't know what else to tell you. And just from the beginning, and he was like that, Martin Nash was like that in his video series too. He had two come out, but the one, not the award-winning Card Magic of Martin Nash, the other one, I can't think of it. I have it here in my notes. Um, the Charming Cheat Show and Lecture was one of them. The award-winning card magic of Martin Nash, which was 1998 to 2004 is what I have in my notes. I might have written that down incorrectly. My point being is that from the beginning of that video, even though he teaches effects and all this stuff and really expands on everything, from the beginning of that video, he talks about soft shuffles. And I joke around with my friends when I talk to them about like, hey, are you guys doing soft shuffles? Like, who's practicing their soft shuffles? And it's amazing to me how he just like from the beginning points out an issue that I've often thought about, and like I run through playing cards because I'm not practicing a soft shuffle. And all it is for those who have not seen the videos, and if you would like to see the videos, Mary Yedid has them on his website, mymagic.com. He has the lecture, he has both sets of videos, DVDs, and he has Infinity and Beyond. That's all of Nash's stuff in one place. The only thing he does not have is the very best of Martin Nash, which was an L&L release, 6-part series, which was originally released as a VHS in 1981. That is on Vanishing Ink, I believe. So, I mean, from the beginning, he talks about soft shuffle. So, and in the book, in the first book, Ever So Slightly, he talks about, like, this is for serious card students. Like, there's stuff in here that, like, if you're in an intermediate beginner phase, this will kind of, like, boost you up a lot. But it's really interesting to just kind of get that tone right off the bat. For example, I'm looking at it and it says here, you will find 2 words repeated over and over throughout this text. They are repeated because they are the most important. Those 2 words are smoothness and naturalness. Without them, a card routine is not of quality it should be. Not of the quality it should be. Like, wow. Like, right off the bat, we're discussing things. We're being introduced to things. This is in the introductory. Like, we haven't even, like, gotten into, like, the first chapter of Sleights. You know, the first chapter in the book is Sleights. So I'm honored to have them in my library. Let's go over a little bit of about Martin Nash. He specialized in close-up card magic. Other way around. I apologize. He was a close-up card magician who specialized in gambling and cheating demonstrations. He billed himself as the Charming Cheat and was a regular at the Magic Castle. Sorry, I'm reading over my notes. He was the 2005 Canadian Association of Magicians Lifetime Achievement Award, 1998 Academy of Magical Arts Performing Fellowship, and 1991 Academy of Magical Arts Close-Up Magician of the Year. The books that have been written about him, which is known as the Nash Trilogy, they were written by Stephen Minch, is Ever So Slightly, Any Second Now, and Sleight Unseen. Ever So Slightly came out in 1975, followed by Any Second Now in 1977, followed by Sleight Unseen in 1979 to round out that trilogy. There also was an obscure book, in my opinion, that came out. A book of applications for Nash's Infinity Crimp called Infinity Power, which was put out by John Rockerbomber and Lee Freed in 1996. Recently, I came across a copy of it, and it was very kindly gifted to me. And pretty much the gentleman who sent it to me saw me on the hunt for it, and he simply just understood how rare that book is, and I'm very gracious for that. So you know who you are who sent it to me, and thank you so much, because I am honored to open up those pages and look through them and see applications for the Infinity Crimp, which, if you don't know what it is, Mary Yedid, again, I'll put a link in the show notes, has the video for sale. It's not a plug. I'm not sponsored by him or anything like that. I just truly believe in sharing sources. So Marieted, I think it's mymagic.com. I know I emailed Mayor about taking it from Infinity and Beyond is the video, but taking it from the DVD and making it a digital download. I don't watch DVDs. I have every streaming platform possible out there, and I just have no use for DVDs. So, one of the things that's interesting that I've come across along my research is in 1994, the December issue of Genie, Martin Nash's very best tabled false cut was published in Gary Olet's Fulminations column. And number one, I'll start by saying if you don't subscribe to Genie, I suggest you do. If you already do, I suggest you go and look this up. I looked it up, and it's just a fun bit of business. You know, it's a shuffle, right? So it's one of those things where it's, you know, he's teaching you this false shuffle, but it's a table. You know, I do table work, so I'm always seated for my close-up stuff. And it's fun. You know, there's a lot of false shuffles out there, so it's interesting to see in comparison where the thinking is on that one and how to utilize it and an application. So check that out. December issue of Genie, 1994, Gary Olet's Fulminations column. Along my research, I know there were a few different references to kind of look through. But really, it was biography stuff. In a couple books I do not have. So I will say this is that I'll kind of go through the beginning. I mean, there wasn't much else I can find on him in terms of like biography, except that he was Canadian and he was proud to be a Canadian. I don't believe Wikipedia even has a page on him, which I was kind of surprised to see. Normally, most magicians have their own Wikipedia page or some sort of information on him. And the only thing I could really go off of is his books. And I think it's really interesting of a perspective to go off of his books because Stephen Minch really captivated Martin Nash in these books. I mean, the man and his philosophy is the introduction. One of the things that's in the book here in the introduction, it says, where does he perform? Now, keep in mind that this didn't come out till 1975, so we're literally in the middle of the 70s. So I was not alive. I have heard stories of that time period in magic and how it was, you know, much different than it is now. But, you know, here it says he mostly performed throughout Canada in the vaudeville of the 70s, the trade show and shopping mall circuit. If you keep your ears open, you will hear of him lecturing the police departments on gambling and cheats, which I've always found really interesting, right? Like magicians who specialize in gambling stuff going to lecture for police departments and discussing with them, like, how to do that. Where I am in Georgia, I don't think that's necessary, but I'd be interested to find out, actually. And it's interesting because it's almost like Martin Nash went against the grain, because the next line says, here is a man who listened to all his magician friends say, you can't make a living doing card tricks, and then went out and did it. Which is really inspiring to me because I have the MO sessions and I own a production company called Dead Slight Society Productions. And it's one of those things where I'm always talking to my friends about why aren't we making money as magicians in this industry? And maybe some magicians who knew Martin a little bit closer might have some more personal insight on that they may or may not want to share. But I'm curious to know, what are we saying making money? Like, what are we What are we labeling that as? So what I mean by that is, are you making money just to pay your bills paycheck to paycheck in a sense? Are we going that route? Or are we talking about like a lot of money? Regardless, it's just an interesting thought I had. It's completely irrelevant. Um, one of the routines that I'm absolutely floored by every time I've seen it on video, um, and I've seen a couple people who studied with Nash do it as well, which is quite interesting. I will put a line out there and say, if you have studied with Nash, I am happy to expand on this episode and discuss it a little bit further. Please reach out to me. You can reach me at mosessionspod@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you. It doesn't have to be for the podcast, just privately about Martin Nash. I would love to. Anything to kind of help my knowledge and insight and reference point is great. So in the introductory, he kind of goes through, and the reason why I continuously am quoting the introductory is because it's so dense. Like, just the introductory is 1, 2, 3, 4.5 pages. And the text is small, so not super small, but it's small. Each page has about 4.5, 5 paragraphs on it, with more than 6 or 7 sentences per paragraph. So this is interesting. In here, it says, the hands must know what they have to do without consciously thinking about it. The routine should be so practiced that it becomes second nature. If one carefully watches sleight of hand performers, especially around the close-up table, and listens to the comments of the laymen around him, he will learn a curious truth. Most of the time, the laymen around him... Oh, I'm sorry. Most of the time, the comments are not, how did he do that? But gee, I saw that, but wasn't it clever? What has happened here? The performer has tipped the move to his audience. In this case, I am not speaking of the poor performer who is simply inept in his technique. I am talking about the man who has worked at his sleight of hand and attained a fair degree of proficiency at it. And this includes some of the best. What tipped the move to the audience? Not a lack of skill. Interesting, right? So, from the beginning, we're just getting so much information, like wisdom and knowledge, packed into the introduction. And I really believe that's how Martin Nash was, although I've heard stories that he was very quiet as well. Another thing I wanted to touch on was in the Infinity Crimp, because Infinity Power is, in my opinion, one of those obscure books that, like, if you know about it, you know about it. I didn't know about it. There's no references out there on it. Nothing. And a lot of my friends who when I told them I was going to do an episode on, Martin Nash, they didn't really want me to talk about the Infinity Crimp. And I won't go too much into it. But what I will say is that if you're able to find Infinity Power, do so. If you're able to find Infinity and Beyond for purchase, do so. It's and the fact that he goes over his tabled pharaohs. I was just reading Jamie Ian Swiss wrote a fantastic in memoriam for Nash. See if I have that reference somewhere. In Genie. Genie Magazine, Volume 72, September 2009, page 11, page 14. It says I have page 11 and 14. I'm not quite sure why I did that. But he talks about how he met Jamie Ian Swiss, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't know legally how much I can talk about it. But it's not my column, in memoriam column. But it's interesting to hear that he knew magicians were, Martin Nash knew that magicians were watching his stuff, and you can see it in his lecture too, which is, I always find interesting, because it's interesting to see that one is performed for people, his video series, and the other one is performed for like two or three, four people. The other one is in front of people. I hope that makes sense. That was confusing. Um, but it's interesting to see the lecture video series that you can watch and learn his stuff from. Um, was what I would expect from a lecture. But it's interesting that he knows magicians are watching him, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, regardless, he's not performing for magicians, right? We're in the wrong business if that's what we like to do, is perform for other magicians. If that, in other words, if that's your goal is that you only perform for magicians, I think you're in the wrong business. Um, and the fact that he knew the subtleties to kind of throw off magicians cracks me up. Like, I could just imagine the fact that when he's performing, let's just say Jacks Are Better, right? Like, he closed out with Jacks Are Better, and he's doing a move or whatever, or subtlety or whatever he has in there, and he knows, someone is watching him, a magician is watching his hands very closely. He can jazz it and do, move out that move or slider technique for another one that will fool the magician as well. Forget about the layperson, they're already fooled. But to fool the magician, check that off, to check that box off is it's very cool. It's very cool in my opinion. But the Jamie Ian Swiss column talks about how he was just absolutely floored at his table pharaohs, and how he can control the ins and outs of his table pharaohs. And I think that's really interesting. I practice table pharaohs, not every day, but I try to, practice once a week. We're again in a strange transition period in our nation, and I think around the world as well, where we're not quite going back to normal, but slowly we are. And anyways, that's another topic I'll be talking about in another episode. But it's so great to experience Martin Nash. I'm surprised that a lot of people don't know more about him, I guess is the way to put it. I'm also really surprised that there's a generation of, not really surprised, it's more so disappointing, maybe not even disappointing, I don't know the word, concerning, I guess is another way, is that there's a whole new generation of magicians that just won't know his work unless, us as I'm on the cutoff. I consider my generation, I'll be 30, I'm sorry, I'll be 29 turning 30. And I think it's interesting to hear that my generation is the cutoff for magicians in this time period. It's really sad to think about. I think it's one of those things that I wish the old schoolers were still around. I think we're in a very confusing time in the magic industry with the virtual stuff and everything else going on. And to hear Martin Nash kind of triumph over that, and to talk about things in his book that like we're just preaching to a younger generation when it really shouldn't be. It should just be something that's kind of already known along our card course. So what do I mean by that? I mean that it would be much better. I think the quality of magic needs to be better, which is a whole nother topic I'll go into on another episode with a friend of mine. But it's interesting, all these small tips and advice that Nash, well, I guess Stephen Minch technically, is getting from Nash. Here's something that I really kind of resonated with, only because I'm this way in general. I'll give you an example. I'm supposed to be going to a wedding in June. Politics aside, hopefully we'll be vaccinated by then. Again, politics aside, And I'm supposed to be going down to New Orleans, and I was asking my wife, it's my wife's friend, what am I supposed to wear? Now, don't get me wrong, I look like a skateboarder and very, almost like homeless looking, I guess is the way to put it. On normal days when I don't have to dress up and kind of like go out, step out and do my thing, be out in the streets as we call it in my family. Um, and if I don't have to step out and look clean and whatnot, I look like I'm ready to shoot like a skateboarding video. Modern, just modern. But anyway, so I was asking her, what do I need to wear? I have tuxedos, I have suits, I have the whole spectrum in my closet. So what should I pack? Do I need to get something? Do I need to get a new suit, a new tux? Like what are we doing here? And she was like, no, we'll probably just, it's casual. And I was like, what the hell does casual mean? For a wedding? Like, what does that mean? And she was like, because when we got married, I made sure, like, my wife automatically knew that she wanted this beautiful, queen dress is what it looked like. It's just huge dress, beautiful, sparkling. And I had a certain tux in mind, and me being, an old soul, I had a tux made, a midnight blue tux that looked like something from late night shows of yesteryear, probably in the bandstand area. But it was one of those, silk trim. It was great. I love it. I still have it. But it was one of those things where it's like, excuse my language, but what the fuck does casual mean for a wedding? I've never even heard that. Oh, we're going to a beach wedding like that. But even a beach wedding, like I've been to a lot of beach weddings and they're not, when it says casual or summer casual, everyone's in linen. Guys are in linen suits. Like it's still a thing. So going back to magic, it's interesting because as I've read through this book, ever so slightly, this is from Stephen Minch, and it's Nash, but Stephen Minch writing it says, and I hope you get something from it. When the card entertainer sits down at the table, he should look, act, and feel like an expert in his field, the pasteboards. When Martin sits down in front of an audience, they know immediately that here is a man who knows what he is doing and does it well. Martin has personally groomed himself to look like the card cheat. Now, in real life, the cheat can look like anyone, a lawyer, a doctor, a truck driver, a businessman. He does not wish to be identified as a cheat for obvious reasons. Martin has assumed the likes and manner of the Hollywood cheat. The stereotype of the card sharp, that people have been conditioned to expect. The mustache, the rich jewelry, the flashy clothing, the smooth, cool manner, they all speak to an audience that here is a man you don't want to sit across the card table from. Interesting, right? So it's one of those things where it's like Sinatra always said the reason why he wore a tux every night on stage is because he wanted his audience, the expectation for him to go on stage from his audience is that he looked his best all the time. Even, it's funny, I was rewatching Johnny Carson and Joey Bishop. I don't know the year. It was probably either late 60s, early 70s, because Sinatra is still fairly young. But Joey Bishop, as usual, Johnny Carson would go on vacations or have a charity event or go do something, and he would have a sit-in. And Joey Bishop, who was part of the Rat Pack, a lot of people don't know that, was sitting in for Carson or for Johnny, and out of nowhere here comes Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, and they sit down, and after a while, obviously it's clear that Dean Martin's on his spiel of maybe he had too much to drink and he's just doing his thing, and Frank is just cool, calm, collected, and per usual. And one of the things he says is like, "What's with all the grays?" Meaning, why do you have gray suits on, Joey Bishop? Like, why is this guy, whoever was the announcer why are you in grays? Why do you have a gray suit on? And I laugh at that. So, everybody laughed at it, but, he goes, and Frank got quite serious and said, this is a midnight show. The people pay hard-earned money to come see a night show, a show at dark. You need to dress for the occasion. This is what they expect from you. Joey Bishop kind of brushed it off and, whatever. But, and he got a laugh. But the point is that Frank was being very serious. He took that very seriously. When you go on stage, you need to present yourself a certain way. If your act or your routine or whatever it is you're doing doesn't call for a suit, then whatever it is it calls for, you better be dressed for it, if that makes sense. And my grandfather was like that very much as well. Is that like there was, and I guess it's a generational thing, but there's certain clothes for certain occasions, and I still believe that. When I'm at home, I look like I'm homeless, but when I step out, I may look homeless still, but I probably look a little bit nicer, right? But if I'm going to a dinner, or which baffles me talking about it a year into COVID, but like if I was going to dinner or some sort of event or something like that, I would dress nice. Even in high school, which I feel like was a long time ago. And I know some of you are listening like, yeah, okay, whatever. But which feels like a long time ago. I was wearing blazers. I was wearing all of that stuff, heavily influenced by a lot of, like, I was reading a lot of GQ. So, like, I was wearing blazers. I was, suits and this sort of thing. And, so, I mean, the point is that, like, I set my expectation to a certain level, and I felt like if I was going to school to make good grades and do what I was supposed to be doing, that I felt like I wanted to dress positive. I wanted to dress proactively, to get to help push my mindset of being in that mode of, like, school. You go to school, a lot of kids go to school and they hate it. I hated school, if I'm being quite honest. It wasn't for me, and that's fine. But dressing a little bit nicer, thrifting for like a blazer or whatever, vintage stuff or whatever, helped push me through it. It sets a certain mood for yourself. I don't know how else to explain it but that. And, my grandfather taught me how to dress properly. He was always, back in the day, was always dapper. And on very special occasions, he pulled out all of his good suits and he would wear them. Even in his late 80s, all through his 80s, he had different occasions where he would wear a suit or a tuxedo. So it's interesting to hear that Stephen Minch is getting this information from Martin Nash and pretty much just saying, this is as a performer what you need to be doing. Another interesting point, and I do apologize that I don't have more personal information on Nash. There really was not, unless, I didn't know him. There wasn't much to get from, who he was born to and his parents and that sort of thing. I have heard things along the way that I think he had a daughter. I'm not quite sure. So here's something interesting. A lot of people have questions about routining, not specifically to me, but about building a routine. And I'll say a couple things about this excerpt from the introductory, and then I'll kind of close it out with a couple of announcements here. So thank you for tuning in this far, if you've listened so far into the episode. It says, when Martin builds a card act, he constructs it like a classic play. First, you get their attention with a few flourishes, spreads, turnovers, one-handed cuts, etc. Once they are watching, hit them with something strong, fast, and uncomplicated. This is your opener, and if you don't get them with it, you aren't going to get them. It's the first impression, and first impressions are deadly important. Once you have won them with a good opener, continue your act with a series of routines that build to a stronger and stronger climaxes. Each effect should register a bit stronger than the last. Then finish with a blockbuster, but again, not something too lengthy or complicated, and know when to stop. As many times as it's been said, many magicians still don't know when to stop and leave them wanting more. 15 minutes is long enough for any card act. If you go any longer than that, you're making a mistake. If you are hired for a longer show, break up the card work with some other form of magic, dice stacking, shells and peas, coin tricks, shortchanging, whatever. Work it like acts in a play. And so I was talking to one of my friends recently about this, and it's just really interesting to hear that. Well, first of all, I'm not going to disclose the information that he shared with me about his routines, but I was sharing with my friend how I'm a very big fan of a writer who's known for his plays and poems, and it's turned into TV shows, and he's one of the most renowned writers. Lots of controversy, whatever. And he said that Nash constructed all of his routines based on those sort of plays and things like that. I just was fascinated by that much thought went into, and that much thought should go into constructing a card routine, pace boards, 52. Unless you're doing gimmicks, there's probably more, but or less. But it's just really, it fascinates me, and I hope you got something from that, because that's really it. I mean, aside from like the scripting part, which is a whole nother topic I'm not going to go into, but I find it really interesting that he's talking about this is his idea of 15 minutes is a long time for a bit of business with cards, right? So it's like, yeah, it's great. I'll close out with this, and then I'll go over with announcements, like I said. You are about to read the work of Martin Nash. When you do, don't just read for moves. Look for the psychology of the routines. This is the real meat. If you learn not one of the sleights or routines in this book, but absorb the psychology and behind the routines, you have come away with a great deal. Notice how Martin strives to make everything natural looking. If a sleight must be done, it should be done to look natural. Natural movements aren't noticed or retained by the mind. And I'll just kind of close out my part with Martin Nash on that. I mean, I don't know what else you. That's what he was about, and it's really interesting to hear. There's a lot of guys out there currently in the industry talking about naturalness, and Vernon talked about naturalness, and Marlowe talked about naturalness, and it's all about naturalness. And I have an episode that I recorded. I believe I put it out, or it was in part of it. But I talk about naturalness and how naturalness, I believe it was on my jazzing episode. Feels like forever ago, but it wasn't. It was only a few months ago. Damn this COVID. Naturalness is supposed to, I think the misconception about naturalness is that it's putting naturalness into a box. Naturalness isn't a cookie cutter sort of A, B, C, D, E, F, G pattern of like, that's how you have to follow it. Like, oh, you go from A, you go to B, you go to C. There's no stream, like structured stream of consciousness there. I think naturalness, I believe that naturalness is, it changes by the person or the performer. So in other words, if you're doing naturalness or you're practicing naturalness in your card work, if it looks a little sloppy, that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, although it's unintentional, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If it helps your sleight of hand look better to be just a tad bit sloppy, because I can't stand seeing these card workers be like, they'll be doing the triumph and all this different stuff, and like they go to square up the cards and it's like so particular and so precise and so clean. And I think that's kind of part of, there's a difference between being clean and handling cards well and it being a little bit sloppy and being deceptive than it is to consistently strive to have perfect up the ladder cuts, right? Like, you're practicing the wrong thing. It's not about making it appear perfect. It's about making it appear perfect in your hands. And maybe making it look pretty and squaring it up all, prissy and nice and beautiful and foo-foo shishi is your goal, then I don't know what to tell you. Good for you. That's your naturalness, but I think there's also a reality of when you watch people handle cards that's not how they get handled. That's not how magicians handle cards. Um, so I appreciate you joining me to talk about Martin Nash and kind of honoring his birthday, March 18th, 1933. He died in July 20th. I'm sorry, that was oddly phrased. He died July 20th, 2009. He was 76 when he died. And I don't know if he's buried, but he died in Burnaby, Vancouver, Canada. So he lived in Canada. He stayed in Canada. Um, yeah, it's I love it. So happy birthday, Martin Nash. Let me do the math real quick. I'm curious to see how old he would be if he was still alive. Um, he would be 87. Wow, 87. 2009 is not that long ago. My daughter was born in 2009, and it would be 12 years. She'll be 12 years old, so 12 years ago. Not it when you think about it, it is a long time ago, but it feels like yesterday. So 87 years old. Wow. I mean, Johnny Thompson lived a long time, so I would have loved to see Martin Nash live longer. It's unfortunate that we are not able to experience him in person, but in spirit, he lives on through his work. And I hope you got something from this episode, and I'll close out with this. So the Georgia Magic Club, where I am located, is putting on an extraordinary afternoon with the one and only Harry Lorraine. Sunday, March 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So for those who are a member of the Magic Club here in Georgia, the IBM Ring 9, it's free for you guys. If you are not a member, it will be $15, and you can visit www.gamagicclub.com/lectures to RSVP. My name is Benny Slade. I hope you got something from this episode. Happy birthday, Martin Nash, and I'll see you on the next one.
This has been a Dead Slight Society production. For more information, visit us on Instagram or Facebook at MO Sessions 52.